There is one factor more than anything else that will affect your performance in the market, whether you are a short-term day trader or swing trader or a longer-term position trader or investor. And this week I'm going to tell you what that is and how to put it to your advantage. Of course, I'll do my normal market analysis and then we'll look at the trade of the week on ZYXI. But let's jump into this week's topic. What is that one factor that drives your performance in the market? It is very simply the trend of the market. The trend is your friend. Trading action will rise and fall with the trend of the market. It's just that simple. It doesn't matter how smart you are, how good of a trader you are. The opportunities will be better when there is an upward trend and worse when there is a downward trend. When the trend is not in your favor, you have to focus on what we call alpha stocks. And those are trading abnormally with abnormal price, abnormal volume. At the end of the video, when I do the feature stock, I will show you exactly how that looks. You need to also be more aggressive on your exits when the market trend is against you. Now, the way I like to explain this is imagine that the stocks in the market are like boats on a lake. Most boats are sailboats. Most boats get blown around by the general direction of the market. So if the wind is blowing one direction, most boats go in that direction. We can think of that as the trend of the market. But on the lake, there's also some motorboats. Motorboats are alpha stocks. Those are the stocks that can trade regardless of how the market is moving. They have their own power. Now, ideally, you want a motorboat going with the wind in the market. But sometimes that's just not possible. If we look at the trading action of the last month, we can see that most of the market really wasn't doing very well. You see here, this is the IWM chart over the last month, and you can see that the general market was going sideways through the first part of October and then selling off into November. Now, the last 4 or 5 trading days have been pretty strong. And if you're a day trader, you will know that the trading action this past week was a lot better. There was a lot more opportunities and the moves that we saw were much bigger. And again, I'll look at the trade of the week at the end of the video and I'll show you one of those and just how much of a move it made, in large part because the market was trending in the right direction. One of the reasons that this happens is market trend shapes optimism or pessimism among investors. People are more likely to chase stocks higher when they're feeling optimistic. And when they're looking at the Dow 30 index and it's up 500 points, they're more likely to be optimistic than if it's down 500 points. It just creates fear and greed among investors. And the result is that stocks will make better moves and there will be more stocks making bigger moves when the trend is up. All right, let's get into this week's market analysis. As you know, every week I go through the markets and look at whether they are bullish, bearish, or neutral to give you a sense of where the market is likely headed in the near term. And we do that short term and long term. So we're going to jump into my website, stockscores.com. As a reminder, remember that I have a free weekly email that goes out. The See More here, you can register for that email and you'll get my weekly email newsletter with some stock picks and general trading lessons. But let's dive into the analysis here. SPY is the first chart we're going to look at. This is the S&P 500. And you can see that we've been choppy basically for the last 2 months. The market has not trended well. This volatility indicates uncertainty. Now, we did get a nice little comeback rally this week, and that sort of negates the breakdown that I was concerned about last week. But until we make a new high, we should still be fairly cautious. If we look at the 3-year weekly chart, you can see that break of trend last week, and that made me concerned. I'm still concerned unless we go to new highs. If we make a falling top and roll over next week, then we need to be pretty cautious. So it's very important what happens next week. Let's take a look at the NASDAQ 100. QQQ is the symbol for the ETF. And again, you can see, this downward move. Trading was less than great through that first part of November and really part of October as well as we went sideways. Nice comeback this week, 3 or 4 good days in a row on a holiday shortened week, but volume very light. And so we can't read a whole lot into that price action because there wasn't a lot of volume. All right, let's move along to the IWM, which is our small cap market. Very similar, nice rally as investors start to think maybe interest rates will get lowered again. We'll look at the bond market chart in just a moment. But that was a good comeback for the market, and it really helped traders this week because the Russell 2000, this index, IWM, is a good representation of retail traders because retail traders tend to buy lower market cap stocks, and this market did well last week. T.XIU, heavily influenced by commodity prices, and gold had a little bit of a resurge. We'll look at that in a moment. And so the TSX actually broke to new highs this week, and that is taking it out of the penalty box, if you will, that it was in the last few weeks as we went sideways. All right, let's take a look at gold now. You can see gold inching a little bit higher. We're still fighting with the fact that the market went parabolic, broke the parabolic trend, built a falling top, but what's nice to see is that we're starting to break out of this pennant. So gold looks healthier this week than it did, but again, look at the volume. Volume very light, as most investors sort of took a holiday week here because of the Thanksgiving holiday in the US. We'll take a quick look at silver. It surged to new highs, really outperforming gold, and so that's a positive. If you're in those silver stocks, I was concerned about it when it broke the parabolic trend, and for the next month we didn't do much, but now we started up again middle of the week last week. All right, let's take a look at the US dollar. UUP is the symbol, and it's grinding its way higher over the last month or two. GBTC is our Bitcoin chart, and of course Bitcoin has been pretty dismal over the last month, and again that takes a lot of the excitement, the optimism out of retail traders' hearts because Bitcoin is heavily bought by retail traders. If we look at the 3-year weekly chart, we can see that that long-term trend was broken, but from a high. So I'm sort of neutral long-term and still bearish short-term. I do think it maybe bounces back from being oversold, but not really a great chart just yet. Finally, let's take a look at the bond market chart, TLT, and you can see the bond market moved up a little bit, which means interest rates moved down a little bit, and I think that was one of the factors that was supportive for the overall market. So my outlook then, I've raised it to neutral again, short-term for US large cap, NASDAQ, and small cap, still long-term neutral. Canadian stocks back to bullish on both time frames. Gold and oil neutral on both time frames. US dollar bullish on both time frames. Bitcoin still bearish short-term and neutral long-term, and bonds neutral on both time frames. All right, let's take a look at the trade of the week. This is an example of a motorboat stock, an alpha stock, one that can move despite the weakness in the market. And it made a big move here on ZYXI on the 26th of November. Now, the way that I find this stock is it starts to trade abnormally just before 10 o'clock. And my indicators, these little pink and yellow dots, alert me to that. Now, I have a program called TradeStation that I use where I've programmed these indicators into TradeStation, and it alerts me to any stock in the market that starts to do this. And that's what gets me to look at it. And so we catch these things pretty early in our active live service at Stockscores.com. We then had a pullback, and you'll see this blue dot here. That's a crossover. It means that the momentum on the pullback is starting to slow, and we get this break higher right here, again with one of those pink and yellow dots. I call those action candles. And the stock then just went on a really nice run higher. Now, realistically, you're in and out of this a few times. Trade it for the run here, break of trend, get out, pull back, get back in on the break of trend, or the break from this cup and handle pattern. So a number of opportunities to trade ZYXI, but the reason it was good to trade is because it had alpha. It's a motorboat stock, and the fact that the market was moving up last week meant it was a motorboat stock that was also moving in the direction of the wind, like a sailboat. So it had both things going for it, and it's really nice to see the market action improve this past week. I'm optimistic that we'll see that continue into the rest of November, or actually into December now that we're starting a new month. So I hope you've enjoyed this week's Market Minutes. If you have, please do me a favor, click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and as always, trade well.